The following segment comes from a full SEC preview episode from Running Out the Clock. If you like what you hear in this segment, then be sure and subscribe to the channel so that you can catch all of our SEC previews, including whether or not we think the teams discussed in these previews will do better, worse, or the same this season. We have to move on to the Kentucky Wildcats. And one of those weird teams. Over the past several years, Kentucky has, of course, had this trend of they start the season well, and then and everyone's like, oh my gosh, look at this. Kentucky's starting off pretty strong. What are they going to do next? And then they have a mid-season collapse. It's happened going back to, 2014, 2015? I think 2016 that was the year they started off poorly. They lost their first two. I'm looking back, but 2014, they won a couple, went to triple overtime against Florida, won a few more, and then lost the entire last half of their season to not become bowl eligible. They needed one more win, and they could not and did not become bowl eligible 2014. So they've had this trend going on. This past season, 2017, was a year in which they didn't necessarily have an entire second half of the season collapse, but they didn't exactly finish strong either. Had a couple of wins sprinkled in there, including wins over in-state. These two teams are in the same state as each other, but against Tennessee and Vanderbilt. I meant to say in-division opponents, Tennessee and Vanderbilt. And that's one of the reasons they were propelled to third place in the East with a 4-4 conference record. Keith, tell us a little bit about the Kentucky Wildcats under John Calipari.
So last year was really bizarre. They were 2 wins away from winning 6 SEC games and 3 games away from having a 10-win record. I mean, they lost to Florida by a point. They lost to Ole Miss by a field goal. They lost to Northwestern in their bowl game by a point. I mean, they were really close to being a top-tier team last year. But the final on their game is a little bit of smoke and mirrors, I guess. They were essentially outgained by at least 75 yards in each of their games. So the scores are less indicative of their actual performance than I think we can take a look at. This year is going to be a little rough. They lost their quarterback. Their 2 biggest options at quarterback this year are going to be a JUCO transfer, Terry Wilson, and sophomore Gunnar Hoke. I think Hoke maybe has the inside track at it just because he now has a full year with the playbook. Even
realistically, it's because his name is Gunnar.
Yes, I mean you can't not start a quarterback whose name is Gunnar.
No, like that's an NCAA bylaw.
Yeah, it also worked out for the Iceland national team.
They want
Mighty Ducks too.
Thank you for making that reference. I was waiting so patiently.
Yes. If there's ever a guy named Gunnar, I'm bringing up Mighty Ducks too.
Thank you.
Even though Terry Wilson's probably the guy built more for the job just because he fits Stoops' spread option offense a little better than Gunnar. So huge question at quarterback. The wide receivers are a concern. They were really inconsistent last year. But they have an all-SEC tight end, C.J. Conrad, who, and we all know this, tight ends are a young quarterback's best friend. They're typically easy outlets. They're easy reads. So maybe they can work off that to help. It also helps that junior Benny Snell at the running back position comes back, and he's on pace to break the school's rushing record in just his junior year. So he's going to be leaned on. Their offensive line is seasoned. They got 4 returning starters coming back. So with their offense, everything's going to hinge on their quarterback play. Defense, however, there's really nothing to be excited about. They were 92nd nationally last year. They've got 8 starters coming back, but again, there's nothing to get excited about on defense, like at all. Their secondary is quote unquote veteran. They are seasoned. And if you guys remember a couple of years ago, Bob Stoops called them all like Hall of Famers, and like they could keep up with like the Floridas and like the LSU secondaries of the world. And then they've just fallen off the face of the earth since then.
Yeah, I think you accidentally called him Bob Stoops a second ago.
Whatever. One of the
Instead of
Stoopses. There's like 600 of them.
So many.
The old Stoops brothers.
Yeah. So I guess if there's a silver lining, Jordan Jones, who is probably their best linebacker, maybe their best player on defense, who was hurt most of last year, had a really good sophomore year, 109 tackles, 15 and a half for a loss. So he's coming back for his senior year. He's healthy so far. But I don't see how Kentucky takes a step forward. With a lot of the SEC East teams looking like they're going to be a little bit better this year, and Kentucky has so many question marks, I don't. The only thing that helps them this year is that their schedule is easy-ish because all of their tough games are pretty spread out. As far as their SEC West games, they have A&M and State.
Ooh.
So A&M is going to be a little bit easier. State's not going to be great. They got absolutely run over by them last year.
But anytime Mississippi State travels to Kentucky, it's
That's
always a slog fest of a game.
All the rules go out the window. It's Thunderdome out there, guys. And I think that Missouri is going to be a little bit better this year.
Yeah.
So they aren't going to have as easy of a road in the East this year. I don't see how they take a step forward from last year.
Yeah, that's the trickiest thing here is if you're trying to establish any sort of credibility. I almost said credibility right there.
That's the word.
Yeah, I'm liking it. So if you want to establish any credibility, that's our new term coined here on running. Copyright that. Then
Taking powers.
Running up the clock. Live from Merriam-Webster's dictionary.
I believe it's Merriam-Webster Craven's dictionary. I'm adding myself in there. Thank
He
you.
married into the family.
Oh, yes, exactly.
How did Merriam-Webster get to just make up words?
Well, they invented words.
Oh.
Before then, the concept of words didn't exist. So that's history lesson for you, kiddos. Yeah, but how do you establish some sort of credibility with a squad like that is always going to be, always going to be looked at as, well, they're the basketball school, and you're sharing a division with the other, basketball school in the conference in Vanderbilt. And so, how do you establish something like that? How do you keep moving forward when, you got seasons like this coming here? Like Rowe in particular will look at that quarterback situation. Gosh, I feel like Kentucky has always tried really hard to find. They're almost, I would even compare it a little bit to Vanderbilt, how like they can never quite find the quarterback that actually fits what they're trying to do. And then when they do find some guy, like they hang on to, and then when he's gone and they have to try to rely on people that have never played Division I football up till now, haven't taken any snaps. What does that do for an offense when the guy who is your signal caller, who is going out there to take that, is that inexperienced?
Well, for starters, let's just revisit this quarterback in Kentucky's. All right. We got 2 legends that came through Kentucky mostly recently, at least recently in my lifetime. So like 10 to 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
First being Tim Couch. All right.
Yep.
Tim Couch was an incredible quarterback for Kentucky. And then my main man, Jared Lorenzen.
The
I love
abominable
Jared.
throw man.
I love Jared Lorenzen
The
so
living
much.
legend himself.
So good.
He represents Kentucky football to me so well. It's like you look at him, even in college, he was pretty big, but now I watched an E60 on him, and he's kind of like fighting for his life. It's actually really good. Go check it out. Doing a little promo for E60. I'll take that back whenever you send it to me, ESPN. But he represents Kentucky football to me because you can look at it. Well, he's probably not going to be that good, but he's like sneaky good in some aspects, but everything else he's just not good. Like he's too big, he's too slow.
Mm-hmm.
He throws like a really good dart. I think for Kentucky quarterbacks, to answer your question, I mean, like, yeah, obviously having a great quarterback is going to be a wonderful thing for them, but I don't think it's going to do much for Kentucky this year. I mean, they're sitting over there in the East, and I think the East is going to be a little bit better than it was last year. So I don't know that it really matters all that much about who their quarterback is, unless it's Jared Lorenzen. Then we're talking.
Hey, you didn't mention Andre Woodson, man.
Oh, I forgot about Andre Woodson. I forget about Andre.
That dude was awesome.
That dude was good, man. That guy was
40 touchdowns as a senior.
Dude, Eminem has been telling you for years, don't forget about Dre.
Right.
Don't forget about Dre. Don't forget about Dre. And Randall Cobb. Forget about Randall Cobb, too. He played quarterback.
Played quarterback for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were coming off of, let's see, they had, for a few years in there, they had Patrick Towles. That's how I'm going to say his last name forever. Some people are like, it's Tolles. No, it's Towles. They had Patrick Towles for a few years before he got up out of there and ended up at Boston College, which I forgot about. That's very interesting. And then they got in Steven Johnson, who was a guy they were able to rely on for a couple of years. They can't rely on anyone at this point.
No.
They have no one to rely on. Is really what I meant. It's not like these guys aren't trustworthy. It's we don't know who they are. So it's I don't know. It's a scary place to be when you're bringing in a group of unknowns to try to, after two straight 7-5 seasons, I believe, and 4-4 in the conference, tied for second 2 years ago, tied for third this past year. You're trying to stay up in that, tied for third. You're trying to stay in the top four of the division for sure. I think that's safe to say that is success for Kentucky right now, is staying there. You're trying to do that, and you got guys that you don't know if you can count on them or not. Chandler, here is the question then. I mean, is this where Kentucky needs to be as a program consistently? All right, because Stoops got there 2013 and went 2-10, then 5-7, 5-7, then 7-6, 7-6. So there's been it seems like every couple of years he jumps up a little bit. So I guess he's due. All right, good for him. But I mean, is this where they should be, realistically speaking? Should they be comfortable right here and be happy with this and build off of this years from now?
I think so. I mean, I think that you've already touched on it. I mean, Kentucky, as long as they're in the conversation for the NCAA tournament, lottery picks, making a run, as long as they're good, as long as they're fine in basketball, and they're doing okay in football, then I think they're fine. I think that people there, just ultimately don't. I get the sense from the Kentucky fans that I know that they don't really care what happens in football as long as it's not an embarrassment. And they haven't really been an embarrassment in the last couple of years. I mean, they've been good, not great. They've got a really good running back in Benny Snell, and I think when you look at football, I mean, for all the different things that you do in football, it's still pretty simple. If you can run the ball and you can stop the run, then you're going to win more games than you lose, and they've got half of that equation right now. And so, I think that they're kind of where their program needs to be. I don't think that, especially not with Georgia finally seeming like they're ready to kind of jump in and really play the game and do the things they've got to do to get the level of talent that they're going to get, which definitely means cheating more. But, especially with
No
Georgia
questions asked.
to do that and that happening, I think Kentucky's in a good spot. Try to hold on to that second or third place spot in the East. Maybe if you can do that for a few years, maybe you catch somebody like a Georgia in a down year and something happens, and Kentucky just has got to build some consistency, and it can't be this roller coaster ride where it's like they're either really, really bad or they're rolling at 8-4 or something like that. I think if you can just kind of gradually build and just kind of keep building the talent, like I said, you've got to get another good running back to follow up Benny Snell, work on the defense, and because look, if you're Mark Stoops, you're going to be playing Vanderbilt every year. You're going to be playing Jeremy Pruitt every year, who is terrible and is going to absolutely run Tennessee even further into the ground. There's my Tennessee rep. Boom.
There you go.
And you've got Missouri, who's still kind of this middling program. So I think that right now they're in better shape than those three teams, and they're not that much worse off than South Carolina and Florida. So as long as they can kind of stay in that particular part of the conversation, and they're not fighting it out for the bottom of the East, I think Kentucky ultimately is fine. I think they're where they need to be.
Yeah, I really only have like a personal fan, like Kentucky fan. I don't really know one guy and he's Kentucky native, born and bred. Every year he comes about it the same way, in which, like, if they're competitive against Florida, he's excited about that. If it looks like they're, if they're not an embarrassment, then he's good with that.
Yeah.
If they look like they're fighting in some games, then he's all about that. And so that's kind of, but at the same time, if it doesn't always work out well, he's not devastated by it still, and that's obviously if you're an elite program in a different sport, then you always, feel like you can jump back to that one. But this is one of those situations where I think they just understand, hey, look, we're not necessarily here to be a top tier football program right now. And if we're winning 7 games, we're going to bowl games under this coach. We're 4-4 in the conference consistently under this coach. And the East, the East could be improved this year. The East could also be about the same as there's transition amongst other programs this year. So maybe Kentucky is still hanging up in that top 4 this year. Yeah. So
ultimately, what Kentucky fan really cares about the bowl game? Because that usually seems like that falls about the time that Kentucky basketball is playing Duke or Louisville, or it's always some top 10 or top 5 matchup between great basketball programs. It's like, okay, fine, like, yeah, we beat Indiana in the Music City Bowl. Go Cats! Like, whatever.
Go Cats!
It honestly sounded like that was not the end of the sentence, so I paused for a moment.
Yeah, that was a Michael Scott situation where I started the sentence and I didn't know where I was going, so I just stopped.
Yeah,
but yeah,
whatever.
Really, what Kentucky fan really cares at that point? Because by the time they get to bowl season, it's like, well, we're into basketball. Things are still looking really good for them all the time at that point. So, just be there. Just be at that point, and I think their fans are going to be okay, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, I do wonder exactly how many Kentucky fans are traveling to the bowl games and all, because I sure didn't bother watching the Music City Bowl this past year. So if we have any listeners who are Kentucky fans,
whatever bowl game they played in, remember Benny Snell got thrown out because the ref grabbed him, and Benny Snell was like, "Get off me," and the ref was like, "You're out of here." And
yeah, that's right.
Dumb.
Don't be sleeping on Blue Nation, man. They travel. They travel well.
Do they?
In basketball.
Yeah. Okay. See, there we go. I want to take a moment to apologize, because I really hate being one of those guys who just kind of makes the same comments as like every other. If you listen to any terrible program on like Fox or ESPN, where people are just like, well, they're a basketball school, there's going to be a basketball school. I apologize if that's kind of what we've been harping on, but at the same time,
but they're a basketball school.
They are a basketball school.
Thanks again for listening to this specific individual team preview. If you want more content like this, be sure to subscribe to Running Out the Clock so you don't miss any more of our SEC previews leading up to this season. You can find the full episode that this comes from by searching for our 2018 SEC Preview full episodes. And you'll want to listen to that because we give a verdict at the end of whether or not we feel like the team mentioned will do better, worse, or stay the same. For Running Out the Clock, I'm your friend Joseph Craven. Thanks for listening.